Hello everyone and welcome to the last video for Bio 30. We are exploring the topic of fetal development and eventually we're going to get to the birthing process. So when it comes to development of baby, or what we call a gestation period or a pregnancy, we know that it's divided in trimesters. And so we're going to look at the first trimester. And the first trimester is going to encompass week 1 to 12. Now we know that for the first 8 weeks, so weeks 1 to 8, we have that embryonic development that we just saw in the last video. A lot of important stages take place during this embryonic development. We see again, lots of growth with that cleavage. We get the implantation in the uterus. We get the gastrula being made, which is that structure that has all of those different layers that will develop into different parts of the embryo. We get the creation of those extra embryonic membranes like the placenta and the amniotic sac. And so lots and lots of different things happening during these first 8 weeks. And in fact, this is the most sensitive to birth defects. And excuse me, any factors that are going to be harmful to the baby are called teratogens. So teratogens are sort of factors that cause birth defects. So before I put a bracket here, we can put some examples. Alcohol is probably one of the main ones, but you may not know this. Things like acetone. So if you're somebody who gets their gel nails done and you want to remove them, they usually use acetone. Acetone during these first 8 weeks can cause birth defects. There's a bunch of medications that you can't take if you're pregnant because they will have an effect on the baby. Okay, so those are all teratogens. And then the last 4 weeks of this time, and we should make a little note here that after week 8, the embryo now becomes a fetus. So after week 8, we can call our little embryo a fetus. So what happens during these last 4 weeks? We have a growth in length. If you remember what I said in the other video, all of the things that are happening during this time, the baby is only about the size of an aspirin, okay? And then we start getting sort of a skeleton that forms. So that means those little bones start to harden. We can hear the heartbeat. Or at least the heart starts to beat. You might not be able to hear it quite yet. It's quite tiny. And the same thing goes with the sex organs. They develop, but you can't see them again. They're quite tiny at this point. And another thing too is the baby moves at this point, but mom can't feel it. Because again, of the size of the fetus at this point. So then second trimester is really, when it comes to what's happening, not necessarily to the baby, but to mom, this is the most exciting trimester for mom, because all of those things that were happening in the first trimester, mom had no clue that this was happening, right? So this is the one that sort of mom becomes a little bit more involved, because here the heartbeat can be heard. Can use one of those Dopplers machines at the doctor's office to hear the heartbeat. The bones and brain continue to grow. And the nervous system begins to function. So for example, one of the things that doctor says at this point, hearing, the baby can hear what's going on. And really, if learning is about taking in information, so if the baby can hear at this point, are they starting to learn? Are they starting to figure out who's mom and who's dad and siblings and all that? Okay. Mom can feel movement at this point. But at this point, the movements of the baby are more like reflexes. They're not really controlled. Okay, the nervous system hasn't quite gotten there yet. And sort of the scalp starts to get hair. The baby is covered in this fine body hair called lanugo. Lanugo in Latin means wool. So this fine little peach fuzz covers the baby. And so it's to protect it and to keep it warm. It's for insulation. And here the baby starts to practice sucking and swallowing. So what you will see is if you do one of those ultrasounds, those 3D ultrasounds, you can see sometimes babies sucking their thumb. And so they're practicing that sucking reflex. They're swallowing amniotic fluid. And so a lot of times what you'll get is the baby will get the hiccups. And you'll feel baby hiccuping inside. Okay, so they're practicing that skill that they're going to need when they're born. And then semester 3, which is, and I had the weeks on there, yes. So this is from week 25 to whenever. It should be 40, but some babies are born early, some babies are born late. Okay. And what I should say is after semester 2, at that week 24, we've reached something called the age of viability. A baby that is born at the end of trimester 2, has a good chance at surviving. Anything earlier than that, it's a little tough. So if you can get to the beginning of the 3rd trimester, your chances of baby surviving if it's born early are much better. Okay. So in this semester, what we get is more brain cells and those little networks, those dendrites that help you learn, are formed. If the baby is male, this is when the testes are going to descend. And if you're going to have one of those 3D ultrasounds, this is when you want to do it, because this is when the baby puts on quite a bit of weight in terms of fat. And so they do plump up. They're not sort of skeletally looking. And at this point, they should move in the head down position. To get ready for birth. A baby that is not born head down is in a breech position. So the best way for the baby to be born is in that head down position. And probably the most important thing that happens in this 3rd trimester is that digestive and respiratory system develop. So the digestive and respiratory systems are the last to develop, because if you think about it, baby's not going to need those until they're born. Up until this point, mom is the one that is providing nutrients, mom is the one that is providing oxygen. So all of the other systems develop first, and then the digestive and respiratory systems are last. And so that's why preemies a lot of times are going to be in incubators, because they need that respiratory system, those lungs, to develop. And a lot of times the reason why babies have colic when they're born is because their digestive system is not quite developed yet. Even a baby that is full term might have a digestive system that is not quite developed yet. And so colic is just the pain that results when milk starts to go through their system, and it's not quite ready to know what to do with it. And so it results in like gas, bubbles, and pain that can make baby cry. So that's what colic is. Okay. To sort of help you with all of these things, definitely you don't need to know everything on this list, but it sort of gives you an idea of what happens during the different stages of development. And so you can see here, the first trimester, the second trimester, the third trimester, it's separated by weeks. Remember that this is when the embryonic development. So at this point, it's an embryo. And after that, it's a fetus, right? And so all of the things, it gives you tons and tons of like little details about the development of baby that you don't necessarily need to know, but I wanted to give you a little bit more there. Okay. So then, now that we've gotten to the baby being developed, the next thing is we're going to look at the birthing process, also known as parturition. So the technical name for it is parturition. And it is in 3 stages again. And you're going to see, I'm going to use a little picture for you to see. Let's see if it lets me. Yes. No, that's a C-section. I saved that photo. Recent. I guess it didn't. Let me see if I can get it for you. Here I was researching C-section. I'm going to put this up after. And lactation. There we go. Birthing stages. This is the one I want. Let's see if it'll let me now. There it is. This is the one. Let's put it here. So there are 3 stages to it. So the first stage is labor. So this stage right here, the very first one, is called labor. Okay. And during labor, what we're doing is we're trying to get the cervix to dilate. So this right here is the cervix. So the cervix needs to dilate to 10 centimeters with help of contractions of the uterus. And we're going to see that in just a second. There's hormones that are involved in those contractions of the uterus. Okay, the second stage here, also known as the expulsion stage, this is the birth. So the birth is obviously the baby being born. And then the last stage, this is known as afterbirth. So the birth is the delivery of baby. And the afterbirth is the delivery of the placenta and any of the other membranes that are attached. As you can see here, the umbilical cord. And associated membranes. Okay, and so let's have a look at labor. And the hormones involved. So the labor and the hormones involved. We're going to need this picture right here for that. So as you can see, it is a feedback system when it comes to labor. And it's going to involve the pituitary. Okay, and you can see here. So what's going to happen is when we're ready to give birth, there is a surge in estrogen from the ovaries. And the surge in estrogen induces oxytocin to be released from the uterus. From the posterior pituitary. And so you're going to have the posterior pituitary is going to secrete a whole bunch of oxytocin. And then oxytocin is going to stimulate the uterus to contract. And as the uterus contracts, what we have is we have the dilation of the cervix. Okay. Also, the surge in oxytocin has another effect. It causes the placenta to produce these things called prostaglandins, which again, they are chemicals that are made on site in the uterus itself. And what they do is they increase the strength of the contractions. So oxytocin causes the contractions, and then oxytocin through prostaglandins causes those contractions to get stronger. As the cervix dilates, what we have is we have this positive feedback of more oxytocin and therefore more contractions, more prostaglandins, more dilation. And then it continues, more oxytocin, more contractions, more dilation, okay? So that's the sort of that feedback system that as the oxytocin is causing the uterus to contract and prostaglandins to be made, the cervix will continue to dilate. And that's why your labor gets stronger, okay? So this is why labor only intensifies. Okay, so it gets stronger as you go along. It is because of these hormones that are being produced. Okay, so that's labor. So let's talk about birth now. So when it comes to that birthing process, we have two kinds of birth. You can have a V birth, which is a vaginal birth. This is what we're seeing here. Contractions of the uterus right at the top are pushing baby down. The cervix dilates to 10 centimeters and eventually baby comes out. That's the V birth, okay? And as you can see here, baby is in the head down position. Or we can have a C-section. So a C-section, also known as cesarean section. This is an incision made along the pubic hairline. I'll show you a picture in just a second. In the abdomen. Through the uterus. And baby delivered from there. And so then you can see, oh, for crying out loud. Let's see if I can get, this one. That's the one. Okay. So you can see where the incision is made, just right along the pubic hairline right here. It's a small little scar, and then the surgeon will make the incision through the skin, through the abdomen, through the uterus. This is the uterus right here. And then you can see baby being delivered, not vaginally, but through that incision. That's how baby comes out. Okay, so that's a C-section. A couple of things again, when it comes to V-birth, some terms that you might need, you might want to know. An episiotomy. Won't show you a picture for that, that's for sure. This is an incision used to widen the birth canal and facilitate birth. So it's to facilitate vaginal birth. So again, baby has to come out from here, right? And so if it's having a hard time, if it hasn't dilated enough, then what the doctors can do is they can use an incision to make the opening a little bit bigger, okay? So they can increase the size of the opening. And then we also said breech. we mentioned it, but we didn't. So this is when baby is not in the head down position. And we can have a look, see if we can find, obviously, I'm going to try and see if I can get some, let's see that one. Yeah, you can kind of see where you can have normal versus breech, okay? They can be sort of in different positions. You can be sideways like that. That's very rare. It's usually the other way around, right? So we can put this one on there. It's amazing to me how much they can sort of, how bendy they are there. And you can see sort of a breech position right there. All right. And then the last thing that we need to cover is going to be lactation. So this is once baby is born, so lactation or breastfeeding. So breastfeeding, this is the formation and secretion of breast milk. And we know for that we're going to be needing some prolactin from, we're going to shrink this down because it don't need to be this big. So we're going to need some prolactin from the pituitary. So PRL, prolactin. From the anterior pituitary. Okay. And so that's what's going to kick everything in. So you're going to see here you have prolactin, and prolactin from the pituitary is going to cause the breasts to produce milk. And it's also going to have oxytocin. Oxytocin is going to cause the contractions of the breast tissue that pushes the milk forward. And then as the baby starts to suckle, what you're going to have is you're going to have a positive feedback. More prolactin is going to be released and more oxytocin. So this cycle is going to continue as long as the baby breastfeeds. Once the baby is done breastfeeding, then what's going to happen is the prolactin is going to stop its production. The oxytocin is going to stop the production. And we're going to, wean baby off of breast milk. Okay, so oxytocin. This one is from posterior pituitary. Right? And so this one is going to help us get milk. So make milk. And this one pushes milk forward. And as we said, as baby feeds, we get positive feedback. Okay. Another term that you might want to know is the very first milk that is made is called colostrum. And colostrum is very important. It is a kind of milk that is high in antibodies and proteins, low in fat, right? And so it helps, oh goodness, I'm going to try and do this again. So it helps with building the immune system for baby, right? But it doesn't have a ton of fat. And so then after that, what you want is you want to have some homo milk. And the homo milk is the one that is going to have more high in fat after that. So for a while after baby's born, you're usually using homogenized milk. And the reason for that is because it has that high fat content. But that very first milk that's produced, that colostrum, does not have, this is not going to cooperate. So I'm just going to write it down here. Colostrum. This is the first milk. It doesn't even look like milk. It's sort of a yellowish fluid. So it's high in antibodies and proteins. And then low in fat, right? But it's only the first milk. And then after that, the true milk comes through and it will be higher in fat. Okay. So this is it, you guys. This is the last section of Bio 30 with development of the fetus and the birthing process. So we're done the course and that's it. So the last thing you have to do is just work on your assignment. I will see you all tomorrow for our Google Meet. Bye-bye.